All right, guys, well, what I want to do really quickly here is I want to discuss just a few things. Today's training is going to focus on kind of two main areas of Chronicall. The first thing that we're going to discuss is we're going to discuss real time, okay? Real time is probably the main reason why you purchased or why you're actually on this training today, in particular the wall boards, or sometimes we refer to them as canvases. So we are going to go ahead and get into wall boards in just a minute here. The second thing we're going to discuss today is we're going to discuss what we call agent dashboards. With agent dashboards, when we get to that point, if you do not have the agent dashboards module, I take no personal offense if you decide to leave the training at that point, okay? So if you don't have agent dashboards, you don't want to stick around for it, don't feel obligated to do so. You can leave if you would like, okay? Otherwise, just you can stay on, and I'm going to go through it anyway. So with that said, those are the two main things we're going to discuss today. I might discuss just a few little housekeeping items really quickly here, but for the most part, I think we can probably just go ahead and jump right in. If you have not been through my other training session, in particular my Tuesday training session, which discusses base license of Chronicle, which is standard reports, cradle to grave, and then we also discuss recording library. If you have not been through that training, I do recommend that you do so because there are a few administrative items that I go through on that training. Okay, I'm not really going to go through any administrative items today with the exception of maybe one item, and that has to do with our user accounts, okay? So let's go ahead and jump in here now. Like I said, if you have questions, ask them. If you don't, then go ahead and leave yourself on mute. The silence just typically tells me, nope, no questions here, okay? And again, also, you are also welcome to send your messages to the GoToMeeting chat box as well. All right, let's go ahead and jump in here. Now, the one thing I do want to mention really quickly today is I want to talk about kind of just really briefly two ways to access Chronicall. The first way to access Chronicall once it's been installed is going to be through any web browser that supports Java. There's really only one. So if you're concerned about which ones do, there's only one, and that is Internet Explorer. I currently am using an Internet Explorer extension on my Google Chrome because I use Google Chrome personally for everything else. So I can do that. I don't know if Safari or if Firefox has an Internet Explorer extension. I kind of assume that at least Firefox does, but I could be wrong there. For sure, of course, Google does because that's what I'm using right now. To access Chronicall through that web browser, up here in your URL, you will type in the Chronicall server IP address followed by :9080. That :9080 is what we refer to as an Apache Tomcat port that allows us to access Chronicall through the web browser. If I fail to put in the :9080 and I hit enter after just typing in the Chronicall server IP address, it will take me nowhere. I have to have that Apache Tomcat port there in order to access Chronicall, okay? Once I've entered that in, it will take me here to the Chronicle Login page. Now, again, that is if I'm in Internet Explorer. What happens if I'm not in Internet Explorer and I do that same thing? I'm going to go ahead and copy my IP address here and just paste this in Google Chrome and see what happens. What will happen is it will not take me to Chronicle, but what it will do is it will take me to what we refer to as the Chronicle Desktop download. The first thing it's going to say is, hey, you're not using a Java plugin that we can use. Okay, so that's the first thing that it's going to tell you. From there, you can now download and install the Chronicle Desktop. Why would you do this? Well, there's two reasons. The first thing is once I've got that installed, again on either Windows or Mac, I have access first to a browserless Chronicle. In other words, I now have a desktop application that allows me to access Chronicle outside of a web browser. That is the main benefit of this. Okay, so for you on the management side, I highly recommend downloading and installing the Chronicle Desktop, if for nothing else, so that you can at least access Chronicle outside of the web browser. The difference between browser Chronicle and browserless Chronicle, there's only one. One uses a browser, the other does not. Otherwise, every feature, every function is the exact same. Okay, so I strongly 100% recommend that you use the Chronicle browserless to access Chronicle. Now, with that, there is a second reason I would actually recommend downloading the Chronicle Desktop, and that is just honestly so you can get the actual Chronicle Desktop itself. Chronicle Desktop is not Chronicle. What I mean by that is it's not accessing Chronicle. What this gives you is several features. First and foremost, one of the first things that comes with this is you will get what we refer to as the agent chat and file transfer tool. Now, you don't have to use this, but this is something that you do have access to. I'm going to make a quick change there. There we go. With this here, what this allows you to do is you can use this to chat with your fellow team members. So you can actually install just the Chronicle Desktop on a user's computer if you want to. You can select to not have the Chronicle browser list installed. So if I just want them to have access to this chat tool, then I can have the Chronicle Desktop installed. And with this now, they can now go through. If they click on a separate user's profile, what will happen is it will pop up with a box that I can now use to send them a message. So here's my good friend Adam Jones. You can see we've done this before multiple times. I can say, hey, Adam. Oops, if I can do this. Hi, Adam. Say hi, right? So I can send him messages, and of course I can also use this, as I mentioned, as a file transfer tool as well. So I can click, drag, and drop that in there, and that will send to him as well. If he's at his desk available to chat, it'll say Adam Jones is typing, and I can see when he's typing back and responding to me. Okay. Now I will mention this. The chat tool and the file transfer tool does not require real time. You have this regardless of what licenses you've purchased. Okay. However, with real time and in particular agent dashboards, there are a few things that will change. With real time, you'll notice you can see pictures in here. Okay. With real time, you will have the ability to add someone's picture to their profile. If you don't have real time, or if you don't add a picture, it'll look like Chris Anderson here. There's just going to be a silhouette there. With agent dashboards, this no longer is just the chat tool. It is still the chat tool, but it now becomes what we call the presence tool. And the presence tool is called such because you can see me right now. This is me. You can see what I am currently doing. You can see this green color in the background. That represents a talking event. I will show you how I know that a little bit later. The additional item that you can see here is that you can see that I am currently on Do Not Disturb. Okay, if I'm on Do Not Disturb, you can actually hover over this. With Agent Dashboards, you can be able to see why I am currently on Do Not Disturb. So I'm on here because I'm doing a webinar/demo. So that means I won't get bothered while I'm doing this demonstration because they can see that I am currently doing a webinar/demo. Okay, all right, there is a question here. Ibrahim, I'm not sure. I mean, that's you. They might have changed they could, I guess, have by default changed instead of having it be the default 9080. I have seen occasions where they've changed the Apache Tomcat to 8080. You can try that. And so at this point, I'm not exactly sure why it's not allowing you to access Chronicall. Were you the installer for this?
No.
Okay.
Just
yeah. So, but they did give you that. They did tell you that that was the Chronicall server IP address.
That's correct.
Okay. Interesting. How long have you had Chronicall installed?
Well, I never was able to get it installed, so I was waiting on the tech support to assist me with the installation. Been having problem with that too.
Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not sure why it would be doing that. And unfortunately, I'm not a troubleshooter, and so it would be a situation where we'd have to have you call into our support staff, and they'd have to take a look at that as to why that's not giving you access. The other thing that comes to my mind is if the Chronicall services have not been started. Have you ever accessed Chronicall before at all?
Yes, I have some managers.
Okay, you have.
Access.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So let's have you call into our support staff once we finish up here today, and they'll take a look at that and see why it's not giving you access to that.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, no problem. Okay, there was another question here by Ronald. So monitored and recorded agents should only have the agent desktop. Yeah, Ronald, that's what I would recommend. Truth be told, I mean, if they have the Chronicle browser list on their desktop, that's fine. They have to have the credentials to log into it. But I mean, to avoid any issues, I would just, when you're downloading and installing that Chronicle desktop, just deselect to have the Chronicle browser list installed. That would be my recommendation. Okay, but you can do that either way. I mean, that's of course entirely up to you. Okay. All right. So with this said here, guys, this is kind of the presence tool. We will come back to this a little bit later as we're talking more about the agent dashboards. We'll bring this up again and talk about this a little bit more in depth. Okay. All right. These are great questions, guys. Thank you for asking questions. Any other questions before we move on here? And I apologize, Ibrahim, that I wasn't able to get that for you. But we'll help you. Okay. All right. Cool. So let's do this now. Let's go ahead. You're welcome. Yeah, no problem. All right, let's go ahead and do this. There are a few other things I would recommend as to why you should download this Chronicle Desktop, and that is because, again, I did mention just overall agent dashboards. Agent dashboards will be set up by you as the manager within Chronicall. However, the features of agent dashboards will be functioning on the Chronicle Desktop. And so if you have assigned me, the user, as an agent dashboard license, then I will need to make sure that I have access to that Chronicle Desktop in order to use those features. Okay, so if you have the agent dashboards in particular, make sure that the users who have that license assigned to them have access to the Chronicle Desktop. Okay. Now we'll talk about how to access that a little bit later as we're getting more into agent dashboards. Okay. There are other features that come along with this tool. They're tools that I discuss more on Tuesdays, but just so you guys can kind of know, we do have a couple built-in alerts, in particular for Chronicall heartbeat issues. In other words, if Chronicall stops logging, or if there is a disk space issue, or even like a recording issue, if you do have recording library, the Chronicall heartbeat can be set up to send you a message to alert you to any time that there's an issue. So if Chronicall stops logging, it can send me a message in 3 different ways. I can get desktop screen pop, I can get an email, and even a text message to let me know that that has taken place. Okay. Along those same lines, I can also be alerted to any emergency number dials. So if my user dials what we consider to be an emergency number, or what I consider to be an emergency number, I will tell Chronicle what those numbers are, and then once they dial that number, then I can be set up to receive what we refer to as the instant 911 notification, which looks something like this. Okay, so everyone on here today has access to that, again, regardless of what licenses you purchase. So these first 4 items, everyone has access to. Okay, these last 2 will require real-time and agent dashboards. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about this, kind of something similar to this, just a little bit with what we call real-time triggers. You can have a very similar function with real-time features. So if a real-time threshold is hit, so too many calls in queue, or a talking duration that went too long, or something like that, or missed calls, I can actually have an alert sent as well for those specific items. Okay, but we'll get to that. All right, so Chronicle Desktop, great tool. I highly recommend it, in particular, especially if you have the agent dashboards. Okay. All right, let's get to the good stuff. We've spent too much time there. All right. With Chronicle, to log in, I use by default, I have credentials that are capital A administrator, lowercase password is my password. Of course, I do not have to keep it as such. I can actually change this to whatever I want that to be, right? So that is actually something that I do recommend. If you have not changed your default credentials, I would highly recommend doing so. To do that, in this left-hand column, I will mention really quickly, you will see here in this left-hand column all of the licenses that you purchased. And in addition, you will also see user management and admin system. User management, I can come in here where it says user accounts. This is where I can change that password. Under here where it says user, new user, I would drop this down to say system administrator, and now I can change that password. Of course, I can also change that login name if I prefer to do so. Okay, so again, I do highly recommend that you do that if you haven't done so already. Now, this is the one administrative item I want to mention today on today's training, and that is this. In addition to being able to change that administrator password, you can also create as many login accounts to Chronicle as you would like. Typically, this is something that most companies or most programs would call like a supervisor license. Typically, you have to pay for those. We do not charge you anything extra for any extra accounts to Chronicle. So you can basically access or create as many accounts. If you wanted to create one for every single person in your company, I don't know why you would, but you could if you wanted to. Okay, so here's the thing I want you to keep in mind when doing that. Of course, I will come through here and put in my credentials. Ronald, if you don't mind, I'm going to use you as kind of my guinea pig here for just a second. So I'd come in here and I would put in Ronald's credentials, and then from there I would go ahead and select what kind of permissions I want Ronald to have. If I give administrator privileges, he has access to everything. There are no restrictions. If I give him access to manager privileges, that means he will have access to all of the licenses that we've purchased, but there will be limitations within the administration section, in particular with system settings. He will not have access to system settings, so he cannot make any system changes. Okay. The main idea behind manager accounts is that they have access to all of the licenses that you purchased. Then there's this last one here, which is user. Now, user is what we use most often. And the reason I say that is because, typically speaking, when I'm creating an account that has limitations. I'm putting a limit to what this person can do within their account. So I'm going to select user and then hit this button here that says edit user access. Essentially what this allows me to do is it allows me to go through the main areas of Chronicle and decide what I want this user to be able to have access to. I'm only going to talk about real time today. Again, I talk about this a little bit more in depth on my Tuesday training, but it's the same concept for each. What I'm going to show you today is kind of the same concept for each of these sections here. Within real time, right now it's on full access, which means Ronald has complete access to real time. He can do anything within the real time module. However, if I drop this down to partial access, a couple things will happen. Number one, I can give him access to create wallboards. Here it says canvases, but we're referring to our wallboards. Okay. I can give him access to create those wallboards if I want him to. In addition to that, I can also select when he's creating those wallboards, which group or groups I want him to be able to see, and even furthermore, which users. So if there's specific users I don't want him to see, I would make sure that they were deselected. So I can give him access to specific group or groups and specific users. Okay. If I don't want him to create wallboards, I can just deselect that option. Then we have this section right here. This section shows you I have three options: read write, read only, not visible, and then canvases. Canvases are my wallboards, right? So I can see that there are currently two created. We have one called two groups and CCWB. With this, I can give him permission to do what I want him to do with those wallboards. If I give him permission to read/write, that means he can see the wallboards that are existing, and he can also create wallboards or edit these wallboards. Or sorry, not create them, I apologize, edit these wallboards. Okay, so if I want him to have access to see them and edit them, I will make sure that I select read/write. If I don't want him to make changes, but I do want him to see them, I can go ahead and put them as read only. If I don't want him to see them, I can go ahead and put them as not visible. Or maybe there's only one that I want him to see. I just want him to see the group or groups that he monitors. Okay, so you have those options when you're creating these wallboards to decide what you want, when you're creating these accounts, you have the option to decide what you want these users to be able to do within those specific areas. Okay, any questions about, and in fact, you know what, let me do this really quickly here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take everybody off of mute on my side. Okay, so you should be on mute on your side, but you're not on mute on my side, which means that you can now take yourself off mute and ask any questions that you have. So are there any questions about this feature?
Yes, I had a question about it. This is fine. So I'm trying to, so I downloaded, I had a user download the agent desktop because they're going to be a recorded and monitored agent. One, he wasn't able to log in with his name and password, so I created a user in this under user accounts as a user. Okay. But every time I go in, say if I go under call detail view or chats or reporting, recording, etc., and assign him partial access while you were doing this, it doesn't save it. It goes back to full access.
Okay, so it doesn't leave it at partial access. Okay. What, Ron, if you don't mind me asking, if you could do me a favor, look and see, if you'll come back here to the Chronicle menu, up here in the top right-hand corner, there's a little bell icon. What version of Chronicle are you? It should say right here where it says version. It should tell you what version you're on.
Version 3.10.
Okay, so 3.10. So you are on the updated version. There might be. Okay, so it's brand new for you guys. Okay. I guess the other question I have really quickly, when that user went to sign into their Chronicle desktop, let me kind of show you, was their name in the list?
Yesterday, yes, it was.
It was, and it's not, is it there today?
I haven't asked him, but.
Okay, you're fine, you're fine. Okay, the reason I ask is I just want to make sure that what happens is this automatically pulls over their names from the phone system, and so they should be able to find their name. It's going to be the one with their name followed by their extension after it, and their password should just be their extension as well. Okay, and then that didn't work. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I again, just for time's sake here, and because I'm not in your system, I think once we finish up here, I would recommend again calling also into our support staff, and they'll take a look at that. Okay. I don't mean to. I don't mean to not give you an answer to this. I just don't know why it's not doing that, or why it's not saving, and why it's not letting your user sign in under their Chronicle desktop. Especially if they are in Chronicall, especially if you can see their name in that in Chronicall, they should have access to that Chronicle desktop. Without, because what happens is when you create a user account for them, I guess let me ask you this question: are they someone that you want to have access to Chronicall?
I want them to be able to see their stats as far as how long they were on not ready, if they missed calls.
Okay.
And again,
do you have the Agent Dashboards module?
Agent's Dashboard module.
Yeah, Agent Dashboards. So what's going to happen with Agent Dashboards is wait, did I already? What? What's that? Sorry.
Was that another training that I needed to sign up?
No. We're going to go through Agent Dashboards today. I'm asking because what happens is with Agent Dashboards, you can create some widgets, which we'll do today. I'll show you how to do this. You'll create widgets that will appear on that user's screen if they have that Agent Dashboard license assigned to them. So for example, if you want them to see certain statistics, then you can do something like this here. This is what we call our dashboard widget, and they can actually dock this to their screen so they can see throughout the day their not ready time, how many calls they've missed, how many calls are in queue, that kind of stuff. But this isn't, most likely it hasn't been built yet. So I guess the other question I have is when they log into that Chronicle desktop, does it give them anything when they log in, or does it say that there's an error when they try to log in?
I'm just trying to do it now, and it just disappears. So
okay, so that would probably just mean, I guess down in the system tool tray, do you see the Zima logo?
I do.
You do see that there?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So that means they're logged into their Chronicle desktop. It just means that if you have Agent Dashboards, then the Agent Dashboards has not been assigned yet. In other words, we haven't built the agents yet. So if you have Agent Dashboards, don't worry about that, guys. That's part of Agent Dashboards as well. If you have Agent Dashboards, then you can build these widgets, and so that way he won't have to have an account to Chronicall. You don't have to give him access to sign into Chronicall. You can just give him, you can assign these widgets to him, so when he logs in, him or her, I don't know, but when an agent logs in, they will be able to see the widgets that you create for them, so they can see these on their board. But this will require the Agent Dashboard license.
And they have them,
okay.
So we're fine.
Okay, yeah. So I'll show you how to do this. Yeah, we'll take care of you. Okay. As far as why it's not saving as partial access, that might be something you'll need to call into our support staff for, because it shouldn't do that. So, okay. All right, guys, we'll come back to that Agent Dashboards a little bit later. Let's go ahead and move on here, if that's okay. I hope that helps a little bit, Ron. If it doesn't, I apologize. We can talk afterwards. But let's go ahead and jump back in here really quickly. Okay, now I want to start off the training today doing what is most, probably the biggest reason as to why you purchased at least the real-time module, okay? When I'm accessing real-time, we come here where it says real-time displays. Now, in real-time displays, I essentially have 4 options, okay? We're going to start with the most popular, which is real-time stats. Real-time stats are the wallboards or the canvases, okay? So if I want to build a wallboard that I can display either just for my entire office to see or just keep up on one of my monitors, then this is where I'm going to go. So I'll go to real-time stats, and a couple things might happen. When you first log in here, you may or may not have some pre-built wallboards like I have here. But the wallboards essentially go through and allow me to select what kind of real-time values I want to see. Now keep in mind, real-time wallboards, or real-time in general, is only going to monitor those users that have that real-time license assigned to them. Okay, so here's just kind of an example wallboard. But here's what most likely will happen. If you have not accessed Chronicall before, or the real-time wallboards before, or if you have and you want to create a new one, down here at the bottom, we've got these different tabs. These tabs allow me to create new wallboards. If I click on the plus sign, I get something that looks like this. Now, what this is, this provides me basically two kinds of options. Option number one is, you know what, I'm creative, I know exactly what I want to see, I want to create my own wallboard. That's what this blank option gives me. The other option I have is to use a pre-built template, right? Because sometimes maybe you guys, when you purchase Chronicall or before you purchase Chronicall, maybe you sat on a demonstration of Chronicall either with your phone reseller or with one of our sales agents, and you went through and saw a demo and they probably showed you some different wallboards that you could use or that you could create. Some of them are probably the exact same ones you're seeing here today. Okay. But what this allows me to do is, guess what? I don't have time to build an entire wallboard, or I don't know exactly what I want. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to go through and do the hard work for you. So for example, maybe, you know what, maybe I am an inbound call center and I care mostly about inbound calls. So I can use the inbound call center wallboard. Maybe we're outbound call center. Maybe we're a blend of the two. Okay. Or maybe I do want to monitor those groups, those two groups together. Or maybe I have 5 groups that have those licenses assigned and I want to monitor all of them. So you've got all of these different options here that you can use. Here's one that we call the Zima inbound wallboard. All I have to do is select the wallboard and then from there hit use template. As I hit use template, it's going to ask me a couple extra questions. Okay. Now it's not going to do this necessarily. It'll change and kind of be different for each one of them here. But the basic idea is this is a pre-built wallboard. So it's going to say, okay, for this wallboard, which group or groups and which users do you want to see featured on this wallboard? So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to say something like the appointments group. And then from there, I'll come here where it says agents, and I get to select which agents I want to be featured on here. So it's looking at group, and then furthermore, on a specific widget, which I'll show you which one in just a second here, we can also do agents. Now, I have 2 options when it comes to selecting agents. In actuality, I actually have 3. We're going to come here to where it says users. Now, I could go through and select each of the users that I know belong to the appointments group. Or I can come down here where it says select all. If I click on this little drop down, I can use members of group. And there's appointments right there, okay? Or I can also use what we call roles. Now, again, I go through this more in my Tuesday training, but essentially a role is a Chronicall created group separate from my phone system groups. So here under users, when I go to members of group, these are looking at your phone system groups. In other words, your hunt groups, your work groups, or your skill groups, whatever you call them, that's what these are. Okay, so these are pulled over from your phone system. But roles are essentially a Chronicall created group, meaning, look, there's a handful of users that I want to report on, but I don't want to report on the entire group. So I'm going to kind of create my own list of users here, and I'm going to put a title to them. So appointments could be my title, and it could feature just 10 of the users out of the appointments group. So stay tuned for that one on Tuesday next week if you haven't joined into Tuesdays yet. For right now, I'm just going to go ahead and select my appointments group, the entire group, and then we'll go ahead and so we can see here it'll select who belongs to those groups, and then we can go ahead and hit OK, and then from there we just hit OK. Now at this point, what's going to take place is Chronicall knows that you don't want to do all of that work yourself. You don't want to do it, or you don't have the time, or you can't think of what would be good to show on a wallboard. So this gives you the option to have Chronicall do all of that work for you. So once this is complete, essentially my wallboard is complete. Now, that's not necessarily the case. These are not set in stone, meaning if there's something on one of these wallboards that you don't like, you absolutely can change something if there's something there that you don't prefer to have, right? This takes just a second here. So I use a demonstration version of Chronicall, so it's not actually connected to a live phone system, so sometimes it runs a little bit slower. It also, you know, the Java from the GoToMeeting doesn't help very much either. But here I now have my pre-built wallboard. So I can see, you know, how many calls we presented, how many calls or how many agents do we have available to take calls currently? How many calls do we have in queue? Right, so we've got all sorts of these great values here. And then I can see here, here's what we call a leaderboard widget. Now, leaderboard widgets are great because it allows me to monitor multiple users and multiple values at the same time. So I can see here, here's a list of all of my appointments group users. Now I can see here, the reason why this is called a leaderboard widget is because guess what? I want to know who has answered the most calls. So if I click on the header here where it says answered, it will move the leader of the group to the top. So we have Melanie Flores, who has answered 33 out of the 35 calls she's been presented. Okay. So we can see she's our leader. Now, at this point, let's say, for example, we don't have any doubles. Here we go. We have a couple triples down here. So we have 3 people that have 4 calls answered altogether. If, for example, Philip Johnson answers a 5th call before Courtney or Cynthia, Philip Johnson will move up the list. So this is an active widget. Okay, so it will move up the list based upon where they fall in that list. So leaderboard widgets are great because it allows me to see who the leaders are for specific or for a column of focus, I guess you could say. So like my answered is my column of focus. But it allows me to see who that is and allows me to see that change throughout the day. Okay, so it inspires a little bit of motivation, right? It's a little friendly competition amongst my users. Hopefully it's not used to shame anybody, you know, because nobody wants to be down here at the very bottom. Nobody wants to be poor Jeffrey Reed. Okay, maybe he's just not here today and he forgot to log out, something like that. But we'll be able to see who the leaders are for our specific wallboards. Okay. Now, once I've created a wallboard, I can put that up full screen. Always make sure you save it. Okay, I can put that up full screen. I'll go ahead and save that really quickly here so I don't lose. I haven't actually made any changes other than that answer column. But I would save that, and at that point, I could put that up full screen by clicking on this little button up here, and it would put that up full screen for everyone to see. Okay. In addition to being able to be put up full screen, the other nice thing about this, again, it might take just a second there. The other nice thing about this is I can create as many wallboards as I want. So because of that, I can actually also have this set up on a loop. So it will loop through all of my different wallboards that I've created. So I don't have to have all of the same information on one. I can have it loop through the different wallboards that I've created. Okay. Questions on these so far? Okay. Now, as I mentioned, these are not set in stone. You know what? Maybe I don't care how many people are logged in right now or how many people are available. If I don't like that, or maybe I don't like the logo, you know what? I want to put my logo here. Okay. So all I have to do is click on this little pencil tool and it pops up with my properties. So now I can change that. So what I'm trying to tell you is, again, these are not set in stone. If there's something I don't like on here, change it. You don't have to have it on here, you know, the way that we have it. Okay. So that's creating a wallboard number 1. Creating a wallboard number 2 is actually my preferred way to create a wallboard, the way I like to do it, and that is by creating my own. So I'm going to come here to blank and then just hit use template. Now, the difference here is this one's not actually going to ask me which groups or which users. Not yet. I'll do that while I'm creating my widgets. But now I've got this blank background that I can use to build my own wallboard. I can start from the ground up. Now, if you do want to add a background, you can do so very easily. Up here, we've got this little pencil tool. I can open this up and I can go through here and see my different options. Okay, here's one called background. Maybe I want to go ahead and add a background that I created in like Photoshop or something like that, or maybe have a desktop wallpaper that I really like. Okay, so I'm going to show you one that I've created just kind of for fun here. I think it's this one. And from there, I can change anything. Maybe the width or the height aren't exactly what I want them to be, or maybe the background positioning isn't exactly great. So I can go ahead and change these as well. Tile is what it is by default. Maybe I want to go ahead and center this. So we'll go ahead and hit apply, and we'll now see my wallboard. Okay, that actually is kind of big, so I'm going to come back in here and try. Let's try stretch and see what that does. That's bad. I don't like that. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Sorry, I apologize. I had a question come through here. Give me just a second. Okay. So Ibrahim's question is any of these numbers a hyperlink? I meant, can you just click either the name or the numbers for additional details? No, not on this, Ibrahim. That it doesn't unfortunately give you further details. Of course, we have cradle to grave, and we have the reports that you can use historically to see information. Right now, this is just real-time information as it's happening right now. Okay, we'll just leave it on center. So at this point, yeah, this is not going to be something that's going to give you additional information other than this is what's going on right now, either with my group or with my specific users. Okay, yeah. Okay, so here's my wallboard here. I don't love that positioning of it, but it's fine for right now just to kind of show you what this does. So I've got my background in. I like it. Now I can start using my different widgets. So across the top here, you've got different options that you can use. Let's go ahead and start with, let's do this Gage widget right here. Okay, so for the Gage widget, all I have to do is select it and then click on the screen, or I can click and drag it to the size that I want it to be. I'll change that in just a minute, but there's my widget. Now here are my properties. My properties now allow me to say, this is the value that I want to see in this widget. So I'm going to come here where it says value, click to define, I'll click on this ellipsis tool, and that will pop up with a list of options. Now I actually have 4 folder options here. I've got counts, which is what we're on right now, durations, miscellaneous, and formula. Okay, formula is for those of us that are brave. If you have a specific kind of formula that you want to see there, maybe you're not seeing a value in the list of options for you. If you want to create your own, go ahead, go right for it. That's perfectly fine. Take a crack at it, and you can build your own values here. Me personally, I'm not that brave. I personally like to use the ones that are already existing. Okay, so let's do a duration for this one. Let's do something like a queue duration. I want to know how long calls have been in queue or are in queue right now, either way. So let's scroll down here. We will find the option called queue duration. And over here to the right-hand side, it's now going to present a few questions. Now, I will mention this really briefly here. You might look at this and say, okay, I don't have some of those questions in my list of questions here. That's okay. These last 2, queue event and should include pending QCB calls, these are part of a separate module to Chronicall called multimedia. We're not discussing multimedia today, so I'm not going to worry about those. So you won't have those if you don't have multimedia. Okay, so we're just going to focus on the things that you will have access to. For this widget, I'm going to start with time frame. What time frame do I want to see? And I actually have 3 different options. I can say, starting from the bottom, I can say, since 8 a.m., what's the total amount of time in queue? Or what's the average queue duration since 8 a.m.? Something like that. Last means I can say, hey, in the last however long, what has been our max queue duration? Okay, and this can be like, by minutes, by hours, minutes, or seconds, right? So in the last 30 seconds, so, or if I want to say in the last 30 minutes or in the last 3 hours, something like that. This one I want to see now. What is our max queue duration right now? What's the longest call in queue right now? For then we hit OK. We now get to choose that calculation, which is our duration, right? So right now, duration, if I just leave it at duration, it's just going to show me kind of like a total of everyone in queue right now, how long people have been in queue right now, total. But I like to see max or average. That's kind of what I prefer to see. Max shows me, hey, what's the longest call in queue at this moment? Okay. Then we get to select which group we want this to look at. So maybe I'm going to select all groups because I'm not sure exactly how many calls are in queue for any of my groups right now. Again, like I said, this is demo. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK there, and then just hit OK and hit apply. So we can see that the longest call in queue right now is around 8 minutes, actually 8.5, almost 9 minutes long. Okay, and I can move this just by clicking on it, or I can change the size by doing this. Makes it a little bit harder to see, but we're going to go ahead and pull it up here. Okay, and of course I can change that text color as well. Okay, but for right now, we're just going to go ahead and leave that as is, and just right there. So that's how I create a widget. Really pretty simple. Just know what it is I want to see, answer the few questions, and we're done. Create another one. Let's do this one right here. This is what we call our title value widget. Same process. I can either click on the screen and just put it in place, or I can click and drag it to the size that I want it to be. Something like that right there for fun. Okay. Same thing. Let's go to value. This time, I don't want to see queue duration. I want to see how many calls do we actually have in queue. So we'll stay in this count folder here. We're going to scroll down and we're going to find queued calls, just like that right there. Again, same thing. There's just a few questions it wants me to answer. Time frame, let's go ahead and say now again. Calculation, this one gives me 2 options. I have count or true false. Count shows me the actual number. True false, if I have calls in queue, it says true. If I don't, it says false. That's not super helpful for me right now. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it on count. And we'll go ahead and say group/queue. Again, we'll just go ahead and select everybody and hit OK. Hit OK, hit apply. And right now, my company has 9 calls in queue. Okay. Again, very, very simple to do. Now, I do want to show you one more thing with this widget in particular, and you did, hopefully you just noticed, we lost a call in queue. In other words, that 9th call was essentially answered, so that needle dropped down. And so again, our average queue, our max queue duration right now is just around 8 minutes. Okay, great. So at this point, guys, really quickly, any questions on these so far? One last thing I want to show you with this widget here, and that is what we call a threshold. Threshold allows me, of course, to see how many calls we have in queue, but also a threshold allows me to see an urgency. So I'll come here. I didn't explain that very well. I apologize. I clicked on the option that said threshold, just right here. Click on the ellipsis tool, and that brings this up. Now I can go ahead and set what my threshold is. I'll just take these little tiles and I'll drag them down to what I want to set, where I want to set my threshold. So we're going to say our first threshold is 7 calls in queue. Our second one, let's go ahead and say we'll say 15 calls in queue or something like that. That's good right there. Okay. So that means if it's under 7, there's no color change. If it hits 7, it'll turn yellow. If it hits 14, it'll turn red. So this allows us to see an urgency with this. And so that way, even if I can't see what that number is, I see that color, and that alerts me to where we're at in that threshold, or in that queue, excuse me. So what that will look like is, right now it's on text color, so what that will look like is it will change the number to that color. Now me personally, I'm colorblind. That's not very helpful, so I come back in here to threshold, and I change it to background color. And that makes it a lot easier for me to see. Okay. Now there's one more thing I want to show you with this. Not only do I have the option to have that change color, I'm going to go ahead and turn my speaker up here on my screen, on my computer here. Not only do I have the option to have it change color, but I also have the option to have it sound off an alarm. So here we've got these little musical notes. Now keep in mind, if this computer has a sound card, if the computer that this is displayed on has a sound card, then this is great. If it doesn't, then these audio bits won't work, or these audio files won't work. Okay, so all I have to do is click on the little musical note, and I can come through here and say, okay, if we ever hit 7 calls in queue, this is the alarm that I want it to sound off. Okay, hopefully you guys can hear that. Okay, so at that point, I can have it hit that many calls, or when it hits that many calls in queue, it will make that noise. Sorry, I'm kind of trying to talk over that. It's kind of loud. Okay, and then of course I can go back and select another one for 14. So when we hit 14 calls in queue, this is the sound that I want it to make. Okay, so you can have them different sounds. Those are preloaded, so you automatically have access to those. If you by chance have your own sound file that you would like to use, then by all means go for it. You are always welcome to upload your own. Our support staff a while ago had one of those old 40s cartoons with Texas Avery wolf howling every time he saw a pretty lady. That would go off every time we had calls in queue, and it scared the goodness out of me every single time, so it's super effective. Okay, so there you go. So those are just a couple things that you can do with those widgets. Again, I know I asked this just a minute ago, but are there any questions on those so far? Or just on wall boards in general, I guess, so far? Okay. Let's do one more widget. The great thing about the wall boards is the widgets are actually really similar. They're all very, very simple to set up. Now, there are a few that take a little more time because I'm doing more with them. So let me show you what I mean. Let's do one of those leaderboard widgets. But I will mention these first 3 widgets in particular. We have bar charts, pie charts, and then the leaderboard widget. These ones are a little bit more time consuming because I have to now go through it. It's not just that I'm choosing one value, I'm actually selecting multiple. Okay, so I can do this by agent, I can do it by group, call direction, or even account code. An account code is more for those of you that have the agent dashboards. If you don't have agent dashboards, most likely you'll never use the account code option, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, but we'll go ahead and do an agent for this one again, and from here we're going to go ahead and do just like we just did with these widgets here. We're going to go ahead and come here where it says values, click to define. Now when I do this, this is where it becomes a little more different. It's not taking me directly to those 4 folders that I have access to. It's going to take me to this window where I need to hit add. Keep in mind, one more time, I'm going to be selecting multiple values, not just one. So that's why I hit this button that says add. Now it pops up my 4 folders and I can start to build my widget. Let's start in miscellaneous. I want to start with one called agent state, and I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to leave that as is, hit OK. Hit add again. Now I'm adding my second value to this widget. Hit agent state again, only this time I am going to change this. I'm going to call this time in state. And we'll switch this to time in state. Hit OK, great. Hit add again. Let's do a count. Let's do a calls answered. Now I can change the name to this if I want. I know what's being answered, so I'm just going to call this answered. Okay. From there, I can go ahead now and do the typical answer or typical questions, time frame. Well, this one I don't want to see actively right now. I want to see, hey, how many calls have they answered since 8 a.m.? Now, I just choose 8 a.m. because that's a lot of times when companies start taking calls. Okay, so there's no specific rhyme or reason to that. I just say 8 a.m. just for fun. And then we go from here. Calculation, again, I'm just going to leave this one at count, group/Q. Well, which groups? Let's do the appointments group on this one. Hit OK, and then hit OK. That's basically it. Let's hit add again. Let's do, okay, we did answered calls. What about missed calls? Here we go. I want to see how many calls we've missed since, again, 8 a.m. Okay. Calculation, again, we'll just leave that at count, group/Q. Let's do appointments. Okay. Okay. There we go. Let's do another one. This time, let's do an event count. So with event counts, maybe there's a specific, I want to see how many calls they have that contain a specific event. So I'm not going to start at the top here. I'm going to start here where it says event. So I can open this up so I can see what events I can choose from. Let's do hold. I want to see how many calls they have with a hold event on that call. So we'll select hold, hit OK. And now I am going to change the name to this. We'll start from the top again. I'm just going to go ahead and call this hold count. Good. Time frame, we've been here before, 8 a.m. Okay. Calculation, again, we're just going to leave that at count, and then group/Q, appointments. Hit OK, hit OK. Let's do one last one. Let's do a duration. Duration, let's do an inbound talking duration. Okay, actually, you know what? Let's do an event duration. Let's come back here where it says event again. We'll come back in here and choose our event. Let's again do hold. Let's do the average duration. So calculation, duration, or average duration of what a hold event is. So we're going to go ahead and say, oh, come on, there we go. We're going to go ahead and say average hold duration. Again, since 8 a.m. And then one last time, group/Q, appointments, okay, okay. Now, I've gone through there, and I've added 6 different values to this widget. I think you guys get it. It's pretty simple, just knowing, as long as you know what you're looking for. Once you know what you're looking for, you select that option, and it's going to give you a couple questions it wants you to answer. You'll answer those questions, and that'll be easy. Okay. I do recommend when you're building a wallboard, if you have customer reports and you're building a report, anything like that, know before you go. In other words, know what you're looking for before you get in there. Create a list, or you put it on an Excel spreadsheet, something like that, just to give you a little bit of foundation to work with. Because if I go through here and I start looking at these values and I start thinking, okay, which ones make sense? You know, and I'm trying to find them. I'm trying to look and see what's available. Like, that's going to take a long time. So if you have an idea of what you want to see before you go in there, that'll help you make your decisions when you're creating the wallboard. Okay. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. As I mentioned, this is an agent leaderboard widget. So again, we can go by down here where it says roles or users. I'll switch over to users. And again, I'm just going to roll down here and come down here again to members of group. And we'll just choose the appointments group. Hit OK, hit apply, and it'll take just a second, but it's now going to go through and build my widget. There it is. Okay. So now I can see the agent state. State shows me what they're currently doing. Time and state shows me how long they've been currently doing that, or how long they've been doing that specific state. And then, of course, answered and missed. How many calls have had a hold count, or how many calls they've had with a hold event. Looks like Alexis Morales has had 3. Who's my leader for hold count? Who's had the most hold? Well, it looks like it's Alexis. That's a good sign, right? We don't have that many. But her average hold duration is around 1 minute and 42 seconds. Okay. So there's my wallboard. At that point, again, I would just go ahead, save it, first of all, and then I would put it up full screen for everyone to see. Okay. So that is how you build a wallboard. Wallboards take the longest part of this. Any questions about building wallboards? Okay. Cool. If you think of something, we can come back to it. So just keep that in mind. All right. Moving on with real time. There's really kind of just one more thing I want to show you. Now, agent timeline, group timeline. Let's really quickly, I'll just mention agent timeline. Group timeline is very similar to this. Agent timeline allows me to see individually what my users are doing right now. Okay, so I can see right now Alicia Ford is on a call, and she's been talking now for 10 10:01, 10:02, 10:03. This is a continuous count. There's no refresh rate with this, so I get to see continuously how long she's been talking. Okay. Now, a couple things. Each of those profiles will show me what they're currently doing. I can see Adriana Taylor is not on a call. She's actually not even logged into her groups. I can see that here because if I look at her groups, she doesn't have a check mark next to any of those groups. However, if Adriana were to go ahead and log into one of her groups, we would see that. So we can now see that she's logged into accounting, and we can start seeing this little blue bar start counting, showing that she's now currently logged in. Now, if she starts to get phone calls, something will happen. Okay, we'll start seeing her profile change color. We can see that her phone is ringing. It's been ringing now again for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's going to continue to count until she either answers it. Now she's talking, so we can see that as that takes place. The color also tells us the event that's taking place. Well, if I look at that color, if I come over here to the far side, I can see two different colors. I see yellow. If I hover over it, it shows me what that means. That yellow bar is a ringing event. It lasted for 9 seconds. It was from someone by the name of Kayla Porter. Then we move over here. The green represents the talking event. So I mentioned earlier, I would show you how I knew that my profile meant I was talking. Oops, that's not what I'm looking for. Sorry. I mentioned this here, and oh, where'd you go? There we go. Okay, cool. So you can see here that I'm talking. That green represents that I'm talking. I know that because I can see this here as well in our agent dashboard, or excuse me, our agent timeline. Okay. So these colored bars just represent events that are or that have been taking place. I say that have been taking place because I can actually click on this and drag back to see what they were doing earlier today, or I can even click on this little timeline bar up here, which will allow me to even have the opportunity to select a different day or even different time. So if I want to know what were they doing this morning at 8 o'clock, I can drop this down and say 8 o'clock, right? So I just come down here, find 8 a.m., and I can see what they were doing at that time. Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay there. Or I can select, you know, I was out on vacation last week. I want to know what they were doing on at this time last week, right? So I could select last week at this time, and then I could see their activity at that time of day. Okay. If I want to go back full screen, I got this little play button up here. I can click on that, and that will take me back to real time. So these little profiles show me a lot. Now, when you first log into this, guys, when you first log into Chronicall and go into the agent real-time timeline, most likely every user that has the real-time license assigned to them will be featured here in this list. However, maybe you don't want to see every user. So if that's the case, across the top here, we've got these little icons here. This last one right here is what we call our filter displaying agents icon. If I select that, that allows me to select which users I want to see. Now, by default, it will show everybody here, but nobody will be selected. It's just showing you anybody who has that real-time license. But as soon as I select someone, as soon as if I come into this list and select someone else, then hit apply, it will only show the users that I've selected to see. Now, one last thing, and that is this. How do we get pictures in here? Because there's a chance that you might not have pictures in your profiles. If you want pictures, I can right-click on the profile. Most likely it'll just be a silhouette at that time. But then I can come in here and hit Change User Image, and that will open up a box that will give me the option to select an image for this user. Once I add that image here to the agent timeline, that image will populate throughout Chronicall. So, for example, not only will I see it here, I will also see it here. Okay, that's how we get our pictures in here. So if you have agent timeline, you can put a picture there. It will populate here as well. It'll also populate next to all of their calls in Cradle to Grave. Okay, so not only in the chat tool, but also in Cradle to Grave will I see their picture. Okay. Any questions about this agent timeline? Like I said, the main thing here is it's showing me what my users are doing throughout the day.
Blake, this is Chris from Sumitomo. I did your class last week as well, but had to leave early.
Okay.
And so I've applied this to my users, the desktop and all the good stuff for my customer service managers. One of my customer service managers came to me with a question on this real-time agent. So she had a user, one of her agents was on the, Vicki, why don't you explain?
She showed that she had been on the call for an hour and 15 minutes which I know sometimes she can be long-winded, but not that.
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
So she said during that time, she took the call, she put the call on hold, she went back, hung up, called somebody else, and it was like it all ran together. It captured that whole event, even though she had put him on hold. She had hung up. So how does that work? How does it
So I guess my first question was, did it show different events, or was it all just one event? Like what I mean by that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, it was all one solid color. So I mean,
okay. Yeah, I'm not sure why it would do that. I've had my demo do that before, where it will say that someone was on a call for they hadn't hung up, and I guess what happens sometimes is Chronicall is very literal. For some reason, it's seeing that call as one call, so it could be something with the phone for that user. Have you seen it again, or was it just a one-time thing?
Just a one-time.
Just a one-time. Okay.
I monitored it that day.
Okay.
They haven't been.
Okay, so it hasn't happened again as far as you know.
As far as I know, right.
Okay, yeah. Do me a favor, keep your eye on that. Sometimes it could very well have to do with the phone. The phone's just not registering that the event has ended. Because if it's only doing it with that one user, and if it's only doing it that one time, then my assumption is it had something to do with the phone at that point. But keep your eye on that, because if you're seeing that consistently with Chronicall, if you're seeing those events that are not separating the event, it's just showing one solid event, that is definitely something that we need to look into further. But as far as if it's just a one-time event, if it's not being replicated or anything like that, it could have just been a situation with the phone. It could have just been not registering that it was hung up or something to that effect. And we can look into that further if it does happen again. But as to why it had done that, and I don't know, especially since it was just as far as we know, a one-time event. But keep your eye on that. Like let's if you're seeing that happen consistently, if it's happening multiple times, that is something that we will of course want to get in there and look at.
Okay. Like one last question for you. Can the users add their own pictures through the Presence tool, or do we have to add it through here?
So you would have to add it through here. It has to be done through here. And we've done that for one main reason, and that is because if you look at our chat tool, you will notice some of us are nerds, right? And we go ahead and put kind of just random pictures in there. And so to limit that activity, we do that here because we all have access to our in-office production Chronicall, but most of the time, most of our clients don't want their users to do that, and so that's why we've made it only possible through the administration account of Chronicall. I think manager accounts can do it as well, but yeah, the users can't do that on their own. If they want to have a fun picture, right, you can just say, hey, send me what picture you want, and you can put it in there. But yeah, it's only done through this interface.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah. Any other questions? These are great questions, guys. Thank you. And like I said, I apologize that happened. I'm not sure, because it hasn't been something as far as we know that's been replicated. Unfortunately, it's hard to know what exactly happened. So let's keep our eye on that. And if you see any further issues with that, then let's call into support, and they'll take a look as to why that's doing that. My assumption it has something to do with the phone, but it could be Chronicall, and we can look into that further. Okay. All right. Okay, there is one last thing I do want to show you with real-time, and that is our real-time statistics. Sorry, I apologize. Our real-time alerts and triggers. Alerts and triggers are actually a really, really helpful tool. This has something to do, kind of like I showed you with that emergency call notification today, but I do want to show you this. Don't pay attention to this right here. We'll come back and talk about that in just a second here, but I want to show you, you're going to see something pop up on my screen here in just a second, and this is directly in relation to the real-time alerts and triggers. there are times where I want my users to know that something's happening. Maybe they're not seeing that wallboard, or maybe they're just not showing enough urgency. So what I can do is actually set up a real-time alert to be sent to those users. So if I want them to know directly on their desktop how many calls we have in queue, we can have this set up to show them. Now we have just 3 different levels. We have our normal, warning, and emergency, and I'll kind of talk about that. But the really cool thing about this is not only can these be sent as a desktop screen pop like these are, they can also be sent in the form of an email and even a text message. So you as the manager, if you're out at lunch, or if you're out of the office for the day at a meeting or something like that, you can have an alert sent to you when you see, or when that threshold is hit, so you know exactly what's going on with your team. And of course, it's not limited to just queued calls. It can be honestly any real-time value. I can create a trigger for any real-time value. Okay, so it's a very helpful tool. The one thing I will mention is if you want someone to receive these desktop screen pops like these here, 2 things have to happen. Number 1, they have to have a real-time license assigned to them. Number 2, they have to have access to the Chronicle Desktop in order to receive those messages. Okay, they have to have access to it. They have to be logged into it to receive these messages. On the other side of that, emails and text messages do not require you to have a real-time license assigned to you, and then you do not require you to have access to the Chronicle Desktop. Okay, so emails and text messages do not require it. Desktop screen pops do. Okay, so let's talk about how to create these really quick. We're going to come back into Chronicall here. If I can find my Chronicle, there we go. Within here, we can come here to the section called Alerts and Triggers. Now, we have 3 levels of alerts and triggers. We have standard, custom daily triggers, and real-time triggers. This is the one we're going to focus on. So we'll come here to real-time triggers and hit create new, click on the ellipsis, and here we now have this little menu. The first thing it wants me to do is it wants me to name this. So I'm just going to call this, we're going to kind of stick with that queue call theme. We're going to go ahead and say appointment queue. And now we get to choose the value. In other words, we want to tell this what to look at. We've done this before. This is like creating a widget. So I can come through here and I can find the value that I want to use. Again, any one of these I can use. I'm going to do just queued calls again. So we'll select that and do the same thing. We're going to say, look right now, and just leave that at count. And I want you to look at the appointments group. Hit OK, great. So it now knows what to look at, what to monitor. Now I need to tell it when to send me the message. So that's where we come to trigger threshold. We'll come down here and say, look, anytime we are greater than or equal to 5 calls in queue, I want you to send a message. So it now knows what to look at, when to send a message. Now I need to tell it how to send the message and who that message should be sent to. So let's start here with desktop users. If I want these desktop screen pops like this, I'm going to start with desktop users and select the real-time users that I want this to go to. So I'll just select a few here. I will select a fax machine. There we go. Okay, so I've got my 3 users, and I now get to choose what that message is going to say. You can see here I've got some custom messages, right? 5 queued calls, finish your calls. 10 queued calls, finish calls now. 15 calls in queue, hang up now, right? So I can customize what this message says, so I get to come in here and type that out, whatever I want it to be. I can change the font to it. I can make it bigger, make it smaller. Really, really simple to do. Okay, sorry, it looks like it's thinking about it. It's open, it's just not letting me type anything in there. Okay, so again, you get to choose these messages. This is different from our typical real-time triggers. Real-time triggers do not allow you to choose what your message is. It's just going to say emergency or logging issue or disk space issue, something like that. It's going to kind of let you know what your issue is. But anyway, I could come in here and say, you know, something like, y'all can do better, if I can spell. There we go, can do better. 5 calls in queue. Oh my gosh, guys, there we go, 5 calls. Okay, of course I can go through, if I want to change that font, I can come in here and make that whatever I want, bigger. I can even add pictures in here or GIFs, if those moving pictures if you want to. So if I want to add a picture here, I just come down here to a new line and I paste a picture there. Okay, so that picture will pop up with that. I haven't tried that for a while. It should still be there. I haven't tried to see if we can do that for a while, for a couple of releases now. Anyway, so you can change that message to have it be whatever you want. Now I get to select my alert level. Like I said, we've got 3. We've got normal, warning, emergency. Normal is gray, does not flash. It's just a solid gray. Then warning looks like this. It does flash, but it flashes slowly. and then you have warning, or excuse me, emergency, which will flash quickly like this. Okay. That means I could create this one as normal, hit OK, save it, and then create the exact same trigger, looking at queued calls, except maybe this time it's 10 calls in queue, and then I would change that message to reflect the different message, and then I would switch this to warning, and then it would look like this. All right, so I can create multiple triggers for the same values, just have them sent at different times with different urgencies. Okay. Then I can send this as well as an email. All I have to do to send it as an email is put my email in here. Oops. If I want this to go to multiple people, just put a comma after each email, and from there you can send it to as many people as you'd like. Then of course I put my email subject, calls in queue, and then of course I put my email body. I won't worry about that, but I can go ahead and put my email body, and that will send as an email. There's one last option, that's text message. If I want to send this message as a text message, I need to find out for whoever this is going to go to, what is their text message gateway for their cell phone service provider. So again, that's called the text message gateway. So for example, here in the States, I go through a company called Verizon. Most of you are probably familiar with that. So for Verizon, I Googled what is Verizon's text message gateway, and it tells me that it's my phone number, whatever that is, just a fake one there, at vtext.com. Okay, so that's how you get a Verizon text message gateway. Just Google it, and there you got it. From there, I can hit OK, and that message is now set up to send in 3 ways: desktop screen pop, email, and text message. Okay. Again, one more time, the desktop screen pop requires them to have access to desktop, the Chronicle Desktop, and have a real-time license assigned to them. The emails and the text messages do not require me to have those items. Any questions about this? Okay, perfect. At that point, I would hit OK and then hit save, and of course I can create. So at that point, if I had created 3 separate triggers, I would see 3 options here. Okay, now you can go through and create as many of those as you want for, again, any real-time value. All right, guys, that basically sums up real time. The hardest part of that is going to be real-time stats or the wallboards, just because it's going to take you some time to create the wallboard and have it featured the way that you want to. Okay, but it's still fairly simple to do. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into agent dashboards. I know we're just about over time. You guys that have been on my training sessions before, you're used to this. I'm very, very sorry. Okay, with this here, guys, again, agent dashboards, if you don't have the agent dashboards module and you don't want to stick around for this training, of course, you don't have to. But of course, if you want to, then by all means go for it, because I'm going to go through it anyway. Give me just a second here. I'm going to take a sip of water. Give me just a second. Okay. Great, let's do this. So again, agent dashboards functions completely on that Chronicle desktop. Now, I will show you again how to set this up. We're going to do all of the setup within Chronicall. But once you assign that license to me as the user, all I have to have access to is that Chronicle desktop. Okay, I come in here. When I come in here, I'm going to find my name in the list. Now, keep in mind, if you, and we kind of ran into this a little bit earlier, it does throw people off. If you do have agent dashboards and you're not used to what Chronicle Desktop does, you might open this up and think, man, it's not doing anything. So a couple things I'll point out really quickly. I mentioned earlier, you will be able to know if you are logged into the Chronicle Desktop because down in your system tool tray, that's right down here, you will be able to find the Chronicle Desktop icon, which is this right here. Now, if that's hidden for some reason, you'll find it here just by clicking on the arrow, and I can see here. If I right-click on it, it will show me what options I have with this. Now, with this, again, if I want that chat tool, with agent dashboards in play, it's not called chat, it's called presence. If I don't have agent dashboards, it will be called chat. Okay. I can see my recent calls. I can see which widgets I have available to me. Those are already featured on my screen. I've got a Gage widget here and this title value widget, but I can see the things I can do. One of the things I will mention is by default, that login password is just going to be their extension. If they want to change that, which I do recommend that they do, they can come here to this user section of their desktop screen pop or their desktop tool here, and they can change that password. If they change that password and forget it, or something to that effect, you can, of course, reset that within Chronicall. Okay, So that is one thing I just wanted to point out really quickly. All right. Now, if I close that chat tool, I can come back in here, right click. If I hit presence or chat, it will pull that up again. Okay. Now, let's go to the main portion and the main reason why Agent Dashboards was created, and that was for these widgets here. The widgets were created because, well, of a couple things. Number one, we had people saying, hey, what if I don't want my users staring at that TV screen all day? Or what if they can't see it, right? So we have these widgets directly on their desktop. Or here's the big one. What if I want them to know their personal statistics of what's taking place, right? How are they performing? That's really why this was created. Agent Dashboards creates agent accountability. It keeps them responsible for the things because it's right in front of their face what's going on, right? So you've got these different widgets. This is my favorite, and the reason being is because, as I already showed you, you can actually dock this widget to your screen. So I can have that just to the side there so I can see, because what will happen is when I open up Chronicall or any other program, these widgets will sit on top, okay? Which is good and bad, right? It's good because they're there visible. It's bad because they can kind of get in the way depending on what it is I'm doing. Now, I have a dual monitor, so I typically keep these over here on my other screen. But with these, you do have a couple things you can do. I can change the opacity so they're less visible. Of course, I can change the size, do whatever I want to do. But what I prefer to do is use this widget here. And again, that's because you'll notice, I'm going to go ahead and just right click and close that one for now. You'll notice here, my Chronicall screen is shifted over. If I drag this over here, it does the same thing. It shifts that over. It shifts all of my applications. It shifts any program that I'm using so that it does not prohibit me from doing the work that I need to do. Okay. You can also drag it to the top or the bottom if you prefer. Okay. But this allows me as the user to see the values that you as my manager want me to see. So let's talk about how to create these widgets. We're going to create two. We're going to create this one here, and we're going to create this one here, or something like it, I should say. So we're going to start here under where it says Agent Dashboard Configuration. In fact, you know what I want to do? I'm going to refresh my demo here really quickly, just so I can make sure it doesn't slow down on us. The majority of Agent Dashboards is these widgets, but we have two other features we're going to talk about as well, known as account codes and reason codes, and I'll show you really quickly. The great thing that I love about Agent Dashboards is the setup for each aspect of it is very, very similar. It's really simple to do, especially if you've created wallboards before, or especially if you've worked with the widgets before. Okay, so it's really similar. So I'll go ahead and log into my Chronicall here again. And once we log in, what we're going to look for, and if you're not sure if you have Agent Dashboards or not, what we're looking for is a section that says Agent Dashboard Configuration. Okay, so we're going to start here where it says Dashboard Values. Dashboard Values is where I get to come in here and create my widgets. Okay, now we're going to create, like I said, two different kinds of widgets today. One of them is going to be very familiar. That's this one here. One of them is not. And I will mention that this widget here, and it's probably pretty common sense, but this dashboard widget here is actually specific to Agent Dashboards. I will never see that unless I have the Agent Dashboards module. Okay. Sorry, this part here, the reason I wanted to refresh my widget is because I know that the demo sometimes takes a minute to sign into this or to get to this dashboard section here. Okay. All right. We'll just hope for the best here. I apologize. Time here. I might try one other thing in just a minute, but we're good. Okay, cool. So here's where I come in here to create my widgets. Now I've already got a couple created. To not cause confusion, we're just going to not talk about any of these. We're just going to start from scratch and create our own. Okay. So here on the left-hand side, what I'm going to see is I'm going to see a list of users that have that real-time or that Agent Dashboard license assigned to them. From here, I've got three buttons at the bottom. I've got Add Agent Value, Add General Value, and Add Widget. Let's start with Add Widget. Add Widget is where I create this. Okay, so this is very similar to what we saw in the wallboards. I'll select Title Value Widget, but before I hit OK, this is the difference. Right here, it's going to give us an option. Do we want to create this as an agent widget, or do we want to create it as a general widget? Here's the difference. Let's start by creating an agent widget. So for this agent widget, we're going to do this exact same widget. We're going to go ahead and just do a missed calls widget. So we'll come here where it says Value, click to define. Again, we've been here before. We'll find missed calls, and we'll answer just our few questions. What time frame? Well, let's do since 8 a.m. Okay. Count, we'll just leave it at count. Group/queue, we'll go ahead and select the appointments group again. Now there is one extra question that we can answer, and that's call direction. By default, Chronicall only looks at inbound calls for missed calls. But if I wanted to, I could also add internal. Outbound doesn't really make sense, so we're not going to worry about that. But internal, I could add if I wanted to do that there. From there, we'll go ahead and hit OK and hit apply. Great. We now have a missed calls widget created. So there's my widget. So now what I have to do is I need to assign it. I have two ways to assign widgets. I can click on this little person image here, which will give me a list of my users, and I can select the users here. Or this is especially helpful if I'm creating multiple widgets. I'll show you why in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and hold my control button on my keyboard down and select just a few different users here. Okay, that allows me to select multiple at once. From there, I can check that box. That means, we're going to go ahead and deselect these other ones here. That means now these three users that I've selected will have one widget on their screen. And it will look like this. This is what will happen and what will appear when they log into their Chronicle Desktop. Now, this is an agent widget, as I explained. Why is it an agent widget? Well, what this means is as an agent widget, when Alexandra Burns logs into her account, she's going to get this widget on her screen, and this is going to be looking only at her. Agent widgets only look at the person that's signed into it. Okay, so Alexandra Burns, when she logs in, missed calls is only going to be looking at her extension. So it's going to be saying, hey, Alexandra, this is how many calls you have missed. Okay, Andrew, same thing. When he logs into his, it's going to be saying, hey, Andrew, this is how many calls you have missed. So agent widgets are looking only at the person that's logged into that account. Okay, let's create this one here. This one's a little bit different. In fact, you know what? I apologize. I didn't explain general widget because we had two options. We had agent widget or general widget. General widgets are group totals. So that would be essentially saying, hey, Alexandra, had this been created as a general widget, this would be saying, hey, Alexandra, this is how many calls your group has missed. Okay. So agent widget is just looking at them. General widgets are looking at their group. Okay. Questions there? Okay, just checking. All right, this widget here is a little bit more, it's kind of like creating a leaderboard widget. It's a little bit different. So that's why we have these other two options, add agent value and add general value. Let's start with add general value.
Blake,
yeah.
Blake, sorry to interrupt you. So I've got a question here. My team that I'm sitting here with, they really like this, the ability to create general widgets and agent widgets. However, they're thinking they don't want the chat function or the presence tool.
Okay. Okay.
Do you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Disable that. Where do you disable?
Yeah, great question. So under my Chronicall menu, under admin system, I go to the system settings section, and under system settings, under basic settings, there's an option for desktop chat. If I don't want my users to have it, I can just, by default, everybody will be selected. So what I would do in that scenario, and then it might not show that they're selected. What I would do in that scenario is I would select all users and then just deselect it. And at that point, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, nobody should have access to it at that point. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I was gonna say, or you could have specific people have access to it if you want to, but you don't have to. Okay. All right, great question. Okay, so with this widget here, this one's a little bit different. Like I said, we're going to come here where it says add agent value and add general value. Let's start with add general value. And I want to create inbound calls presented, but I'm going to change the name of this to kind of illustrate my point. I'm going to call this group presented. So here where it says time frame, again, we're just going to go through and answer our questions, right? So we're going to say since 8 a.m., calculation, we'll just leave it count, group/queue. Go to the appointments group, hit OK. Now, at this point, I could hit OK, or I can select agents here. What this basically means is this. Maybe within my appointments group, I've got 4 or 5 different teams, and the users that I'm going to assign this to are part of team 1, right? Appointments team 1. So I want them to know how many calls their group has been presented for just the specific users that belong to their team. So I could come in here to agent and select the users that belong to their team. Okay. In essence, I could use a role in this scenario if I wanted to. So if I had appointment team 1 as a role, I could select appointment team 1 and would only look at the users that belong to appointment team 1. Otherwise, if I leave agent blank, it'll just look at the entire group. So that's up to you. I can have it either look at the entire group, which is fine, or in that group, if there are specific users I want this to look at. Now, when I say that, I mean it's still going to give me a grand total, but it's only going to give me a total of the users that it's looking at. in that group. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Again, like I said, if I don't select agents, it's just going to look at everyone and give a total for everyone within that phone system group. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that as is. Now you'll notice here it's already selected, and that's because I've already got these users selected here. If I don't want that to be the case, of course I can deselect that and then just select the users that I want to have access to that. Okay. Let's see if I can remember who I selected. Okay. From here, again, I can go ahead and just hit that group presented. And now what will happen is these users will now have two widgets on their screen. One that looks like this, showing them how many calls they personally have missed, and another widget that looks like this, except it's only going to have one value on there. And that one value is going to be group presented, displaying how many calls their group has been presented. Okay.
Like,
was there a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what does that exactly mean, presented?
A call is presented to the group, meaning a call, it was an inbound call that was presented to the group. So it rang to that group, essentially.
Okay, so that just means total call volume, really. It
For inbound calls only.
Okay, so it's not really do is answered or missed or anything. It's the total of inbound calls.
Right, yeah, so it's not counting missed, it's not counting abandoned, it's just looking, this is how many calls have been presented to your group to answer. Doesn't mean it was answered, it was just saying this is how many calls came in essentially to your group.
Okay.
I need to drop.
Yeah, no worries, Ron. I saw your message here.
Okay.
Yeah, so no worries. Yeah, I'll get that sent over to you for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks, Ronald. Okay. All right, guys, let's go along here really quickly, unless there are other questions. I apologize, like I said. These are great questions, so please don't hesitate. Okay. All right, so one last thing I wanted to mention with this, and I do want to add one more value, and that's an agent value. With this one, let's do, instead of inbound calls presented, let's do inbound calls answered.
Excuse me,
sure.
when I come up with this, I'm asked which version of the widget am I trying to do? What's the line bar on the left called?
That one, it's actually not going to be in your list of widgets. Okay, so it won't be here. I'll just use these two options to create the widget. Okay, so if you want this one here, you'll use these two options here: add agent value and add general value. Okay, does that answer your question for you?
So it's just going to add the information I put up there. There's no pre-filled widget, if you will.
Right.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. And the benefit of doing that is because it allows you to do both individual agent. Like I said, you've got your agent value. Agent value is just looking at the agent that's logged in, and then general value is giving them like a group collective total. So this will allow you to do a widget that shows them both personal information and group information. So for example, one for me, right now it says that I am currently on Do Not Disturb. That's true. That means I am personally currently on Do Not Disturb. So that would be like an agent value because it's looking only at me. Okay. Whereas if you have inbound calls presented, me personally, I have not been presented 154 calls. Okay, so that would be more like a general value because general value is looking more at the group collective total instead of just me specifically. So I can have both individual user information and group information found on this widget. Okay, so and so coming back in here to add agent value, instead of doing inbound calls presented, let's now do inbound calls answered. And I'm going to change again the name to this one. We're just going to call this one solo. And we're going to solo answered. And we're going to go ahead and again answer our few questions here, again, since 8 a.m. And then group/Q, we're going to go ahead and say appointments, okay, and then we'll go ahead and hit okay. And there we have it. Okay, so again, it's already assigned because I've already got those users selected. Now, what that means is they're now going to have two widgets. They're still going to have two widgets on their screen. This one here showing them how many calls they've missed. And this widget here, but it's now going to have two values on it. One showing group presented calls, which was created under general value, and then solo answered means this is how many calls they've answered out of those calls presented for the group. And solo answered was created under agent value, meaning it's just looking at the person that's logged in. So Alexandra would be shown, this is how many calls your group has been presented, and then this is how many calls that you personally have answered out of those presented calls. Okay. So that's how you create those widgets here. Any further questions about those items? Perfect. Guys, I apologize. Give me 5 more minutes if that's okay with you. Of course, assuming that my demo will work for me here. I'm actually almost tempted to just do this here and open up my new demo. My other demo here. The other thing I want to talk about really quick is what we refer to as account codes and also reason codes. So while this is pulling up here, I'll come down here to kind of show you what account codes mean. When I am an agent dashboard agent, when I have that license assigned to me, from this point on, anytime I get a call or make a call, I'm going to get a little screen pop that looks like this. Okay. Now this screen pop is essentially a caller ID. It tells me who's calling or who I am calling. Okay. And the benefit of that is now I can do 2 things with this little screen pop. Number one is this. If I right click on this, I actually can add notes to this call. So if I want my manager to know something that took place on this call, I can pull this note box up and I can say, this guy wants to speak to a manager. Okay. Not a manger, but a manager. There we go. Once I hit OK, that account or that call now has a note attached to it in Cradle to Grave. So you as the manager will now be able to get into Cradle to Grave. You would see this phone call and you would be able to see that there was a note added to that call in Cradle to Grave, and you could see what that note was. Okay. The second thing I can do with this is I can add an account code. In fact, let me do this really quickly while we're kind of waiting here to see if it'll speed up for me. Okay. Account codes essentially allow me to keep track of who we're speaking to and why. I can report on this information, and I can also search for that information in Cradle to Grave. So account codes right here, these are something that you are going to have to create. You will create a list of account codes, but once I've created those, I can assign those to the user, and here's what will happen. As I'm on this call as the user, I can now come in here and add my account code. So if I click in the box, I'm going to get a drop-down list of options. Now, I have a huge list of options here, right? But at this point, maybe I want to say, okay, look, this call was for Avaya. Right, there we go. There's my list of Avaya options. I can then select the one that applies to me. There we have it. Or that applies to this call, excuse me. Now, not only can I do that, but I can actually also sub-account code this call, which basically means I can add other account codes. So not only was this call for Avaya, but why did they call? Well, they called because they wanted training. Right? So I can go ahead and find my option for training, and there we have it. I can add multiple account codes to this call. So why does this even matter? Well, once I, as the user, add those account codes to this call and hit that check mark, those calls are now associated with account codes in Cradle to Grave. So now you as the manager can run reports and search for calls in Cradle to Grave using those account codes as search filter criteria. Okay, so again, like I said, the idea here is basically just give you the option to see who we're speaking to and why. If I want to know, hey, you know what, I want to know this. So for example, here again, we have our list of users on the left-hand side. Down across the bottom, we've got 3 options: select all, select none, and bulk add. We'll get to bulk add in just a minute. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and say add account code. That pops up with a window here where I can now add an account code. Maybe they called because they wanted to talk to Dr. Blake. Okay, hit OK, great. There's a new account code right there. Add account code again. Well, why did they want to talk to Dr. Blake? Well, they're calling because they're canceling their appointment. Okay, or maybe they're calling to speak to Dr. Chris. Oops. And why? Well, they want to call because they're a new patient and they want to see if Dr. Chris is accepting new patients right now. Okay, so these can be whatever. They can be the name of a company or client, and they can be reasons, right? Why someone's calling. Once I have my list of options here, same rules apply. I select who I want these to go to. It looks like Alexander Burns has a different picture here. That's kind of funny. I never noticed that. Anyway, but I can go through here now and say, okay, Alexander Burns. Again, we've got Brandon Carpenter, and we'll say Brian Freeman. Okay, so I can see here's the users that I want to assign this to. I can now either just check each box individually, or I can hit select all, none, and that will select all of them at the same time. What happens now is once I hit OK, these are now assigned to this user. So now anytime they get a call, they're going to have that list of, or that little screen pop up, and they can now go through and add those account codes to that call. And again, you can report on that and search for that in Cradle to Grave. Okay. Now you can also do a bulk add. Bulk add basically means kind of doing the same thing where you come in here and you can say, Dr. Blake, oops, okay, Dr. Chris. So you add the account codes this way. Once you've done that, you can then There we go. You can then hit bulk add, and you can find that notepad text file that you've saved and hit open, and boom, there you go. Okay, so really, really simple to do. But again, now we can keep track of who we're speaking to, and again, for which reasons. Okay, any questions about these account codes? Okay, last thing, one more thing here, and that has to kind of do with that presence tool. We kind of already talked about this just a little bit. Now this, for some of you, it sounds like this might not matter, and that's perfectly fine. But again, here you can see what I'm currently doing, but you can also see I'm on Do Not Disturb. Okay, and it's going to tell you why. Well, how does it know that? Well, that's because I created a list of what we call reason codes. Now we have 3 different kinds of reason codes. We have busy codes. This might consist of Do Not Disturb. It might consist of release, depending on your phone system, and it also might consist of aux codes, AUX. It just depends on your phone system. Most likely, most of you are going to be busy codes, is going to be Do Not Disturb. But the reason why we didn't call that Do Not Disturb is because there are different kinds of busy codes. But it all means the same thing. Essentially, it's Do Not Disturb. Okay. Now, with busy codes, what can happen is I can come in here and create a list of reasons as to why someone might be going on Do Not Disturb, release, or aux. I can do the same thing for group logout as well as extension logout. And what that means is when I hit that DND button on my phone, I'm going to go ahead and take myself off of Do Not Disturb. When I hit that DND button on my phone, 2 things will happen. Number 1, that will highlight. Number 2, it's now going to pop up with a list asking me, hey, why are you going on Do Not Disturb? Well, right now I'm doing a webinar/demo. Now, other than, and forgive me, these demo things are going to pop up here. Other than just being able to see that here in this presence tool, that's nice, but that's not the main reason why we created this. The main reason why we created this is because you as a manager can now run reports on this information. You can run a report as to how long or how many times someone went on Do Not Disturb or logged out of their group or logged out of their extension, how long they were logged out of their group extension or were on Do Not Disturb, and also now why. So all I have to do for this is come in here. This is my busy codes. I'll come in here and do add reason code. From here, why would someone be going on Do Not Disturb? Well, maybe because they're getting a drink, refill, drink. Okay, we've got a couple here already. Oops, I misspelled that. That's okay. You guys get what I'm saying. So we've got a couple here already, but all I have to do is hit add a reason code, add my list, and then again, same thing. I select who I want this to apply to. Okay, oops. And then I just check those boxes. Once I hit OK, anytime that user now hits Do Not Disturb or logs out of their group or logs out of their extension, they're going to have access to select a reason why. So if I hit Do Not Disturb, well, here's why. I'm refilling my drink. Okay, and you can run reports on that. If I log out of my group, it's the same process. It's just a different list. Why are you logging out of reception? Well, because I'm going to do paperwork. Okay, and then of course the last one is logging out of my extension. If I log out of my extension again, it's just a different list of options. Why are you logging out of your phone? Well, because I'm done for the day. I'm going home. And you can see I logged out. Now that's just part of my demo. I didn't actually log out. I logged out of the demo essentially. Okay.
Blake?
Yeah.
I'm just confirming for my team here. It appears to me if you want to be able to use these reason codes, you would need to enable that chat.
No, not unless you want to see why someone is currently on Do Not Disturb. Like if you wanted your user to be able to see why someone's Do Not Disturb and why they shouldn't be, sending them a message or whatever, yeah, you might use that chat tool. But if this is purely for your need to know, then no, they don't have to have access to that chat tool, because when they hit that DND button on their phone, or when they log out of their group or extension, this little list will pop up. So you don't actually have to have that that chat tool to use this.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So that's a great question. Are there any other questions about this? Okay, cool. Well, as usual, I'm notoriously long-winded. I apologize. I've gone so far over here. I hope that this has been able to answer some of your questions. I hope this has been able to give you some insight on using these features and these tools, or you can always reach out to our support staff as well. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time, and have yourselves a fantastic day.